Occasionally, people ask, who started Amazon Outreach anyway? Well, God used a core of people, but our origins are best framed by the words of Paul in 1 Corinthians 3:6. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. Our founders will tell you they often didn't know what they were doing, but God was working behind the scenes every step of the way. One of the first key players was Johnson Ellis. In 1990, he was tasked to find a mission trip for his church. But growing up as a missionary kid in Brazil, the last place on his mind was the Amazon. He was initially intrigued by a mission opportunity in Hawaii, but God used a humble flyer to shift him away from what might have become Hawaiian outreach.
Well, back in 1990, Prestonwood had tasked me with looking for the church's first churchwide mission trip. And as part of that process, I got a call from a pastor in Hawaii, and he wanted us to consider coming doing a mission trip in Hawaii. And it sounded fantastic, but I didn't have any peace about it. And as a part of that process, I got a pretty humble, nondescript brochure from a ministry on the Amazon River. And I put that in my briefcase and headed off to a business trip out of town in Florida. And on the way, I read the brochure and wasn't paying too much attention to it. But during that weekend, I decided to visit a local church. And wouldn't you know it, that the guest pastor that morning was Richard Walker, who was the pastor who had sent that brochure to Prestonwood. So sitting there in that church service, God pretty easily convicted and convinced me that this was the opportunity for the church. And a year later, we took 28 people down on the river. And from that core of people, God created the group that would ultimately turn into Amazon Outreach.
So the core of Amazon Outreach would go on their first trip in 1991 with Richard Walker's ministry, Amor. God would use the next few years to form the DNA of Amazon Outreach, especially Richard's philosophy. They won't believe the words of your mouth until they feel the touch of your hand. When Richard had a heart attack in the mid-90s, it appeared the Amazon mission trips would come to an end, so God raised up one of those core people, Dallas real estate developer Jeff Blackard, to officially start Amazon Outreach as a 501c3 mission. The first year, a boat was rented. It was a horrible experience, so Jeff began the search to buy the mission's first boat.
So we took off on this journey through the jungle. I mean, we ran over an anaconda this big in a Jeep. Finally, we get to the shore. We take this little speedboat up the jungle even more, and out of nowhere, there is a boat that's just been completed. I mean, when I say completed, just the wood. And the river came up, picked up the boat, and the boat was just floating. No engine, no anything. And I said, okay, we sat on that boat and negotiated to buy that boat. Now, I negotiated a purchase price with him, and I didn't have all the money. By the time I landed back in the United States, their dollar came down to exactly how much money I had to buy a boat. I mean, it was totally a miracle.
Now that a boat hull was purchased, Jeff needed to find someone to finish it. He found the answers with Jed Thompson and Marco Rego. Jed became the executive director in the United States, and Marco Rego in Brazil. Their first job was to complete construction of the Linda Esperanza. It wasn't easy, but God was with them every step of the way, even if it meant removing a contrary customs agent.
You know, there have been a lot of challenges, but it's been so miraculous and really fun just to watch God take care of our problems along the way with Amazon Outreach. He's just been the great orchestrator and has helped us at every turn. I always think about the time Jeff and I were bringing an engine from the U.S. down to Brazil for the Linda Esperanza. And we watched them loaded on the plane in Miami. And then we got on the plane and we were high-fiving each other thinking what a great job we had done and all that. The plane door closed and all of a sudden we heard this noise. And they were taking the the engine back out of the plane, off the plane. And what had happened was there was too much weight with already on there. When they put the engine on it, it was over limit. So they took it off. We ended up taking off in the plane and leaving the engine behind. We couldn't get them to wait or anything. So anyway, the engine thankfully got down there the next day, and then the big hurdle at that point would be to get it through customs, which sometimes could take a month, or it could take a year, or the engine could disappear, or whatever. Also, we had a guy that didn't really like us that was heading up customs. And so anyway, thankfully the plane got there the next day, and with the engine, and it went through, it got to customs. The guy was sick that day, and the guy that took his place really thought a lot of Marco and the mission and got us right through. So we saw then that it wasn't us at all. There was no credit to be given to us. It was what God had done. And we are so thankful for everything He's done. You know, there's 1,000 stories like that. What God has provided, the people He has provided for us, and taking care of the situations. He is the great orchestrator, and this is His mission.
So Jed, Marco, and others worked diligently on the Linda Esperanza up to the very first week of the official Amazon outreach trip in 1999. Phyllis Woodward was tasked with leading the first team of 49 people. She can tell you there were many challenges, but there were even more miracles that have continued to this very day.
I often say that the biggest miracle of the first trip was that anybody came back. There were 49 of us on that trip, and we brought all our donated items in 2 big 70-pound boxes. We actually rented a U-Haul trailer to take everything to the airport. And then once we got to the boat, we realized it was sort of like moving into a new home. There were no doors attached. The hammock hooks weren't even installed. And we came up with this brainy idea to share in the cooking and the laundry on the team. And so my sister and I volunteered to do the laundry the first day. And when we looked around the boat, we found the tiny little washer and dryer in the hold. And so we said, that is not going to work. And so we took trash cans in the showers on the back of the boat and did all the laundry. Then we hung everything up all around the boat to dry. And then about the third day, we were like, this system is not going to work. So we hired a laundry lady and a cook. But the poor little Brazilian cook had no idea what to do with all of our American canned goods and things that we brought. And so one day we woke up for breakfast and we had this huge bowl of all the canned tuna dumped in there. And another day we had popcorn and bananas for breakfast. And one night for dinner, she took all the mixed vegetables and she put them in a big casserole and she laid hot dogs in there. And so another thing that we realized was there's a big drip, a leak that went all the way down the second floor ceiling. And so we had to clothespin up the Ziploc baggies all up and down to prevent dripping. But with all the mishaps that happened on the boat, the actual ministry in the village was just beautiful. And there were so many lives transformed as a result of that trip. But I'll just tell you one. There was a boy named Marcelo that came to our VBS. And he heard John 3:16 for the first time. And he said he never forgot it. And it's the reason he became a Christian, and he's a pastor today, and he actually ministers on our Amazon outreach boats. So I just think about the hundreds of trips that have happened, all the lives transformed in the villages is on the boat, and all the Marcelos that still need to hear the gospel. And I just want to say thank you to anyone that's ever been on a trip or ever sent somebody on a trip. And I just want to tell you that you are making a difference.
We are so thankful to everyone that has been part of Amazon Outreach for our first 25 years. But most of all, we thank the Lord for enabling us to mobilize over 8,000 Americans and almost as many Brazilians to impact over 300,000 villagers with the gospel. In the name of Jesus, the sick have been healed, The blind have received sight. The thirsty have received water. The forgotten have received hope. And most importantly, the lost have been saved. And now we look with great anticipation to the future. We see God raising up a new generation of short and long-term missionaries. We see a new mission base as light to the river. And we see the plans for our new mission boat as a way to impact 10,000 more villagers a year with the gospel. We are excited about our future, as we are thankful to our past. To God be the glory.